I thought the ocean had taken everything it could from me. My career, my marriage, my youth. But I was wrong. Phuket took the rest. She said I was her first real love. My best friend said, "You deserve some happiness, mate." And 8 months later, I found them in the same bed, my bed. I don't know which hurt more, losing her or realizing I'd been blind the entire time. This is what happens when a lonely man mistakes kindness for connection and brings his best friend to paradise. A few nights ago, I got an email from someone who's been following this channel for a few months now. He said this story, this kind of betrayal was his too. Only his took place in Chiang Mai, not Phuket. He told me he'd trusted a friend, believed a woman, and lost everything in the space of one afternoon. Reading his words felt like hearing my own thoughts coming back to me from another corner of the world. At first, I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, but because it's almost unbelievable how similar our mistakes can be. Then, as I kept reading, I felt that familiar ache in my chest, that heavy mix of regret and understanding. It reminded me that what we share here isn't just heartbreak, it's recognition. Proof that behind every story like mine, there's another man wondering how it all went wrong so fast. And to all of you watching, whether you've been here since the start or just recently joined, thank you. Your messages, your comments, your quiet support mean more than you think. If you're new, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Every word you leave helps remind me and others that none of us are truly alone in this. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. The first time I saw the Andaman Sea from my apartment balcony, I thought I'd finally made it. 40 years working on cargo ships, 15 years in a marriage that died somewhere between Vancouver and the Arctic Circle, and 2 grown kids who called maybe twice a year if I was lucky. I was 64 years old and I was done. Done with the cold, done with the loneliness, done with waking up in empty rooms that smelled like regret. So I took my pension, bought a one-way ticket, and landed in Phuket with 2 suitcases and a belief that maybe the last chapter of my life didn't have to be written in gray. The apartment wasn't much, just a studio near Patong with a view of the palm trees and the distant beach, but it was mine. No ex-wife's lawyer on speed dial, no shipping schedules, no weather reports that made my bones ache before the storm even hit. I spent my first week doing nothing but walking. I walked the beach at sunrise, bought fruit from street vendors who laughed at my terrible tie, sat in cafes where no one knew my name, or cared that I'd once spent 3 months stuck on a tanker off the coast of Nigeria. It felt like freedom, or at least what I imagined freedom should feel like for a man who'd spent most of his life following orders. It was on one of those walks, maybe 2 weeks in, that I pulled something in my shoulder. Old injury. The kind that comes back when you least expect it. A local guy at a noodle stand saw me wincing and said something in Thai, then pointed down the street. Massage. Good. Not expensive. I followed his direction and found a small spa tucked between a tailor shop and a 7-Eleven. The sign said, Sabai, Wellness, in faded English letters. Inside it smelled like eucalyptus and lemongrass, and that's where I met her. Renrada was working the front desk, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a simple blue polo with the spa logo. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. Not the practice smile you see in tourist traps, but something softer, like she was genuinely happy someone had come through the door. "Hello, you need massage?" she asked, her English careful but clear. I nodded and touched my shoulder. Something's not right here. Pulled it this morning. She stood and came around the desk, barely came up to my chest, and she reached out gently, pressing near my collarbone. "Oh yes, very tight. You work too hard, maybe?" I laughed. A real laugh for the first time in weeks. "Not anymore, I'm retired." "Retired," she repeated, testing the word. "That mean you rest now, yes?" "That's the idea," I said. She smiled again, wider this time. "Good. I help you rest." That first session was professional, nothing strange about it. She led me to a small room with soft lighting and had one of the older therapists work on my shoulder. But when I came back to pay, Renrada was still there, and she asked how I felt. Much better, I said honestly. You should come back 2, 3 times, then shoulder very good, she said, writing something on a card. She handed it to me, a discount voucher. For you, because you new here, need take care. It was a small gesture, but it landed heavier than it should have. I hadn't had anyone care whether I came back or not in a long time, so I did come back. 2 days later, then twice the next week. Each time Renrada was there, asking how I felt, remembering small things I'd mentioned, like how I was trying to learn Thai, or that I missed good coffee. On my 4th visit, she said, "You want I show you good cafe, not tourist price?" I must have looked surprised because she laughed. "I not working now. I finish already." We go, yes? We walked 3 blocks to a place I never would have found on my own, a tiny spot with plastic stools and an old espresso machine that hissed like it had a grudge. The coffee was strong and bitter and perfect. We sat outside under a tarp and she told me about her family, about her younger brother and sister back in Chiang Rai, about how she'd come to Phuket 2 years ago to make enough money to help with their school fees. "You have family?" she asked, stirring sugar into her cup. I hesitated. 2 kids, grown now. They live in Canada with their mother. "You miss to them?" "Sometimes," I said. "But we're not close. Hasn't been that way for years." She nodded like she understood, like that wasn't strange or sad, just a fact. "Family hard sometimes," she said. "But you here now. You make new life, yes?" "I'm trying," I said. She reached across the table and tapped my hand lightly. "You doing good, I think." I started going to that cafe every few days, and Renrada often joined me after her shifts. It became routine, comfortable. We'd talk about small things, the weather, her co-workers, my attempts to cook Thai food that always ended up too spicy or too bland. She laughed at my stories about life at sea, about the time we got stuck in a typhoon near the Philippines, and I had to eat nothing but instant ramen for a week. "You very brave," she said one evening, her eyes serious. "I never go ocean, too scary." "It's not brave if it's your job," I told her. "It's just what you do." "Still brave," she said. "I think you very strong man." No one had called me strong in years. My ex-wife used to call me absent, my kids called me when they needed something, and my crew called me sir or chief, but never strong. Hearing it from Renrada, this young woman who barely knew me, it stirred something I thought had dried up. One night after we'd had dinner at a street vendor near the beach, she asked if I wanted to walk with her. We followed the shoreline, the sand cool under our feet, the lights from the bars and hotels reflecting off the water. "You lonely, Graham?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I'm getting used to it." She stopped walking and looked at me, her expression hard to read in the dim light. "You don't need be lonely, you know. You good man." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her shampoo, something floral and sweet. "I like you, Kun Graham," she said softly. "You different from other farang here, you kind." "I like you too," I said, my voice rough. She smiled and took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. We stood there for a moment, just the 2 of us and the sound of the waves, and for the first time since I'd landed in Thailand I felt like I wasn't just passing through. Things moved faster after that. She started spending her days off at my apartment, cooking meals I couldn't pronounce, teaching me Thai words I'd forget by the next morning, curling up on my couch to watch movies with terrible dubbing. She'd fall asleep with her head on my shoulder and I'd sit there, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had made this possible. I bought her things, small stuff at first, a new phone case because hers was cracked, a cookbook in English so she could practice, a pair of sandals she'd looked at twice in a shop window. She always protested. "No need, Graham. I not need." "I know," I'd say, "but I want to." She'd smile and kiss my cheek and say, "You too good for me." But it didn't feel like I was too good for her. It felt like I'd finally found someone who didn't see me as the guy who left, the guy who was never around, the guy whose best years were behind him. She saw me as someone worth staying for. One morning I woke up and she was already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, looking out at the city. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, my voice still heavy with sleep. She turned and smiled. "I think how lucky I am. You come to Thailand. You find me." "I'm the lucky one," I said. She shook her head. "No, you don't understand. Before you, I only meet bad man who want only one thing. You first man who see me, really see me." I got up and sat beside her, pulling her close. "I see you," I said, "and I'm not going anywhere." She rested her head against my chest. "Promise?" "Promise," I said. 3 months in, I got a message from Peter Collins. Peter and I went back decades, worked on the same ship for 5 years in our 30s, stayed friends, even after we went different directions. He'd retired a year before me, moved to Toronto, spent his days fixing up his house and complaining about the snow. The message was short and Danchin, Peter. "Heard you're living the dream in Thailand. Old man, mind if I visit? Could use some sun and cheap beer." I smiled reading it and texted back, "Door's always open, mate. Come whenever." 2 weeks later, Peter showed up at the airport. Same crooked grin, same loud laugh. A little grayer and a little rounder, but still Peter. We grabbed a beer at a bar near my place and caught up, swapping stories about retirement, about the jobs we'd left behind, about how strange it felt to wake up without a schedule. "So where's this girl you've been seeing?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "You've been holding out on me, mate." "I didn't want to jinx it," I said. "But yeah, there's someone." "Well, don't keep me in suspense. When do I meet her?" "Tonight if you want," I said. "She's coming over for dinner." Peter raised his glass. "Look at you, domesticated already. Never thought I'd see the day." That evening, Renrada came over with bags of groceries, ready to cook. When she saw Peter, she smiled warmly and waved. "You must be Peter. Graham tell me so much about you." Peter stood and shook her hand, his grin widening. "All good things, I hope. And you must be the famous Renrada. Graham's been singing your praises." She laughed and glanced at me. "He too nice. I not so special." "Don't let her fool you," I said. "She's incredible." Dinner was loud and easy, the kind of night where the hours disappear. Renrada cooked pad thai and green curry, and Peter kept us laughing with stories about his disastrous attempts to install a new toilet that ended with water flooding his basement. Renrada served him seconds and thirds, refilling his beer, asking questions about Canada and his family. "You very funny, Peter," she said, her cheeks flushed from laughing. "I like you." "Well, I like you, too," Peter said, raising his glass toward her. "Graham's a lucky bastard." After dinner, Peter and I stepped out onto the balcony while Renrada cleaned up. He lit a cigarette and shook his head. "Mate, you've really landed on your feet here. She's something special." "I know," I said. "I'm trying not to screw it up." "Just don't overthink it," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You deserve this. Enjoy it while it lasts." His words sat strangely with me, but I didn't say anything. Later that night, after Renrada left, Peter crashed on my couch and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I replayed the evening in my mind, the way Renrada had laughed at Peter's jokes, the way she touched his arm when she refilled his drink. It was nothing, just her being friendly. But something about it made me uneasy. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was just what happened when you'd been alone too long. You started seeing problems where there weren't any. Peter extended his stay, said he. Was having too much fun to leave, said Phuket was exactly what he needed after a brutal Toronto winter. I didn't mind at first. It was good to have him around, someone to drink with, someone who remembered the same storms and the same ports. Renrada didn't seem to mind either. She'd join us for dinners and beach walks, translating menus and haggling with vendors on Peter's behalf. "Your girl's a gem," Peter said one afternoon while we were sitting at a bar near the beach. "She's got a good heart." She does, I agreed. I'm grateful for her. You should be, he said, finishing his beer. Not every man gets a second chance like this. But as the days went on, I started noticing small things. Renrada's texts became shorter, less frequent. She'd say she was busy with work or helping a cousin with a salon across town. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile and say, "Yes, of course. Just tired. Worked too much." Peter started disappearing too, saying he was exploring the island or checking out beaches up north. One evening, I saw a photo on his phone by accident. The screen lit up while he was in the bathroom. It was Renrada on the back of a motorbike, her arms wrapped around someone's waist. The angle made it clear it wasn't me. When Peter came back, I asked, "Did you and Renrada go somewhere today?" He looked surprised for a second, then laughed. "Oh yeah, I needed to get some stuff in town and she offered to translate. No big deal." "Right," I said, feeling stupid. "No big deal. You're not jealous, are you?" he asked, grinning. "Come on, mate. She's just being helpful." "I'm not jealous," I said quickly, hating how defensive I sounded. He clapped me on the back. "Good, because you've got nothing to worry about." But I did worry. I worried when Renrada said she needed to visit her family for the weekend, and Peter also happened to be gone. Said he was taking a trip north to see some temples. I offered to pay for her bus ticket and she refused. "No need, Graham, I have money now." "Now?" I asked. She waved it off. "From work, they give bonus. I tell you already." But she hadn't told me. I spent that weekend alone in the apartment, replaying every conversation, every smile, every moment where I'd felt like maybe I was imagining things. When they both came back on Sunday night, Peter looked sunburned and relaxed. Renrada acted normal, sweet even, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. "How was your family?" I asked her. "Good," she said. "My brother doing well in school, my sister too." "That's great," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She kissed my cheek and said she was tired, needed to go home and sleep. After she left, I turned to Peter. "Did you have a good trip?" "Yeah, mate. Saw some amazing views, real peaceful up there." "Alone?" I asked. He looked at me, his smile fading slightly. "What are you trying to say, Graham?" "Nothing," I said, backing down. "Just asking." "You need to relax," he said, his voice harder now. "You're going to ruin a good thing if you keep acting paranoid." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that I was the problem, that my years of loneliness and failed relationships had wired my brain wrong, made me see betrayal in kindness and suspicion in friendship. So I apologized. I apologized to Peter for being weird, and I apologized to Renrada the next day for being distant. She hugged me and said, "You don't need worry, Graham. I not go anywhere." But she was already gone, I just couldn't see it yet. The night I found out was humid, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin and makes everything feel heavy. I'd gone to dinner with a neighbor, an older Australian guy who'd been in Phuket for a decade. We talked about visa renewals and the best places to buy fish, boring expat stuff, and I got back to the apartment earlier than expected. Peter had said he was staying in town, something about meeting up with a girl he'd met at a bar. I didn't think much of it. I unlocked the door and heard laughter, her laughter, coming from the bedroom. For a second I thought maybe I was imagining it, that my mind was playing tricks. But then I heard Peter's voice, low and familiar. I stood in the doorway, my hand still on the knob, my body frozen. The bedroom door was half open. I could see the edge of the bed, the clothes on the floor. I wanted to turn around, walk out, pretend I hadn't seen anything, but my feet moved forward. I pushed the door open fully, and there they were. Renrada and Peter, tangled together in my bed, in the sheets I'd washed 3 days ago. They both froze when they saw me. Renrada pulled the blanket up, her face pale. Peter jumped up, scrambling for his pants. "Graham, mate, this isn't what it looks like." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it had closed up, my chest tight, my vision tunneling. "Graham, please," Renrada said, her voice shaking. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Peter stepped forward, hands up like he was calming a wild animal. We didn't mean for this to happen, it just did. You have to understand. Understand? I repeated, the word foreign in my mouth. Renrada started crying, clutching the blanket. I love you, Graham. I do, but I love him too. I don't know how to choose. Her words hit me harder than anything Peter had said. She loved us both, like it was some kind of justification, some kind of excuse. I turned and walked out of the room, out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the street. It was raining, a soft, warm rain that soaked through my shirt in seconds. I walked without direction, without thought, just walked until my legs ached and my mind went numb. I didn't go back that night. I checked into a small guest house near the beach, the kind of place where no one asks questions. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone, at the messages that started coming through. Peter, mate, we need to talk, please. Renrada, Graham, I'm so sorry. Please come back. We talk, yes? I deleted them all. The next morning I went back to the apartment when I knew they'd be gone. Peter's stuff was already cleared out. He'd left a note on the counter. I'm sorry, mate. I never meant to hurt you. I'm leaving today. Hope you can forgive me someday. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Renrada's things were still scattered around. Her toothbrush in the bathroom, her hair ties on the nightstand, a sweater draped over the chair. I gathered everything, put it in a bag, and left it outside the building. Then I called the landlord and said I was moving out. Within a week, I'd found a new place, a smaller studio on the other side of town. I stopped going to the cafe, stopped walking the beach at sunrise, stopped doing anything that reminded me of her. People asked if I was okay, and I'd say yes. Just needed a change. But I wasn't okay. I'd wake up at 3 a.m, my mind replaying that night, the sound of her laughter, the look on Peter's face. The way she'd said she loved us both like that made it hurt less. I'd lie there in the dark, wondering what I'd missed, what signs I'd ignored, what kind of fool falls for the same trick everyone warned him about. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that I'd built everything on nothing. Every smile, every touch, every moment I thought was real had been a performance, and I'd been so desperate to believe in it that I'd ignored every red flag, every inconsistency, every moment where my gut told me something was wrong. One night I got a message from Renrada, the first in 2 weeks. Graham, can we talk? I need you to understand. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Understand what? She replied immediately. You don't understand, Thai heart? We love different. I try to love you both, but you not accept. I can't help my feelings. I read it 3 times, each time feeling something different. Anger, sadness, disbelief. Finally I typed, you didn't love me. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. She didn't reply after that. Days turned into weeks. I stopped checking my phone for messages, stopped expecting apologies that would never come. I started swimming every morning, something I hadn't done since I was young. The ocean was indifferent, cold and vast, and that felt right. It didn't care about my heartbreak, didn't care that I'd been stupid enough to trust the wrong people. It just existed, constant and unchanging. I met a few other expats at a coffee shop, guys who'd been through similar things, different details, but the same outcome. We'd sit and share stories, not for pity, but for perspective. You bring a friend and a girl together, what do you think is going to happen? One guy said, a British man named Colin who'd lost his savings to a woman and her brother. It's the oldest trick in the book. I didn't think Peter would. I started, but Colin cut me off. They always do. Mate, that's the point. You trust them so you don't see it coming. It wasn't comforting exactly, but it helped, knowing I wasn't the only fool. Knowing that this happened to men every day in this city, in this country, all over the world. We were all just lonely people looking for connection. And some people were smart enough to exploit that. I started writing about what happened, not for anyone else, but for me, trying to make sense of it. I wrote about the first time I saw Renrada, about the coffee shop, about the night Peter arrived, about the moment I walked into my bedroom and everything fell apart. I wrote about the anger and the shame and the part of me that still, even after everything, missed her. Not the real her. I didn't even know who that was, but the version of her I'd created in my head. The one who'd called me strong, who'd held my hand on the beach, who'd promised she wasn't going anywhere. That version never existed. A few months later, I walked past the spa where we'd met. There was a new girl at the desk, younger, smiling at customers the same way Renrada had smiled at me. I thought about going in, warning her somehow, telling her that this job wasn't what it seemed. But I kept walking. It wasn't my place and she probably wouldn't believe me anyway. Nobody believes it until it happens to them. Before I left Phuket for a trip back to Canada to see my kids, I recorded a voice message on my phone, something I planned to share online, a warning for other men like me. If you ever come to Phuket looking for love, don't bring your best friend, and don't confuse kindness with connection. I learned that the hard way. I learned it in a way that cost me my dignity, my trust, and 8 months of my life. But maybe if you hear this, you won't have to learn it the same way. I listened to it once and decided not to post it. It felt too raw, too personal, like I was begging for sympathy I didn't deserve. Instead, I saved it in a folder on my phone, a reminder of who I'd been and who I didn't want to be again. On my last morning in Phuket before my flight, I woke up early and went to the beach. The sky was just starting to lighten, the water calm and clear. I stood there watching the waves roll in and out, erasing footprints, smoothing the sand, resetting everything like nothing had ever happened. That's what the ocean does, I thought. It doesn't hold on to anything, doesn't carry grudges or memories, it just keeps moving. I thought about Renrada and wondered if she ever thought about me, if she felt guilty, or if she'd already moved on to someone else. I thought about Peter and whether our friendship had ever been real or if I'd just been useful to him. And I thought about myself, about the man who'd come to Thailand looking for peace and found betrayal instead. But standing there, watching the sunrise, I realized something. The ocean had never lied to me. The waves had never promised me anything, never pretended to be something they weren't. People did that. People lied. People pretended. The ocean was always honest. I bent down and picked up a small shell, smooth and white, and put it in my pocket. Not as a memory of her, but as a memory of this moment, of the decision to stop carrying the weight of what happened and start moving forward. I turned away from the water and walked back toward the road. The city was waking up, motorbikes buzzing past, vendors setting up their stalls, the smell of street food mixing with the salt air. It was the same Phuket I'd arrived in months ago, but I wasn't the same man. I'd lost something here, maybe more than one thing, but I'd also learned something. I'd learned that loneliness makes you vulnerable, that desperation makes you blind, and that the hardest person to forgive is yourself. At the airport, I sat in the departure lounge and watched families and couples pass by, young backpackers with oversized packs, businessmen in wrinkled suits, and I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't angry anymore, not at Renrada, not at Peter, not even at myself. Anger takes energy, and I didn't have any left to give. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken over the past months, the ones I hadn't been able to delete. Renrada laughing at the cafe, Peter with his arm around my shoulder, the view from my old balcony. I looked at them one more time and then I archived the whole folder, not deleted, just archived, tucked away where I wouldn't stumble across them by accident. When my flight was called, I stood and grabbed my bag. I didn't look back at the terminal, didn't take one last glance at the country that had broken me and taught me in equal measure. I just walked forward, through the gate, onto the plane, and into whatever came next. Hours later, somewhere over the Indian Ocean, I closed my eyes and let myself sleep. And for the first time in months, I didn't dream about her. I dreamed about the water, about waves rolling in, infinite and indifferent, washing everything away. When I woke up, the plane was descending and I could see the lights of a new city below. I didn't know what was waiting for me. Didn't know if I'd ever trust anyone again the way I'd trusted Renrada and Peter. But I knew one thing. I'd survived. And maybe that was enough. The sea had taken everything from me. My youth, my career, my naivety. But it had also taught me how to float. How to let the current carry me when I was too tired to swim. How to trust that eventually I'd find the shore. I thought about the message I'd recorded, the one I never posted. And I thought about all the men out there making the same mistakes I'd made, believing the same lies. Maybe someday I'd share my story, not as a warning but as a testament, proof that you can lose everything and still wake up the next morning. Proof that betrayal doesn't kill you. It just shows you who you really are when everything else is stripped away. As the plane touched down, I looked out the window at the gray Canadian sky, at the snow melting on the runway, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not happiness. Not peace. But relief. Relief that it was over, that I didn't have to pretend anymore, that I could stop waiting for the other shoe to drop because it already had. I gathered my things and followed the other passengers off the plane, through customs, into the arrivals hall where no one was waiting for me. And that was okay. I didn't need anyone waiting. I walked outside into the cold air and took a deep breath. It stung my lungs, sharp and clean, the opposite of the warm, thick air in Phuket. It felt like waking up. I called a cab and gave the driver my son's address. I hadn't told him I was coming, hadn't told anyone really, but I figured it was time to reconnect, time to stop running from the people who actually knew me. The driver made small talk about the weather and I nodded along, half listening, watching the city pass by. It looked different than I remembered, smaller somehow, less significant. Or maybe I was different. Maybe 8 months in paradise had changed me in ways I couldn't articulate yet. When we pulled up to my son's house, I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring at the front door. I didn't know what I'd say, didn't know if he'd even want to see me. But I walked up the steps and knocked anyway. He opened the door, surprise flashing across his face. "Dad?" "Hey," I said, suddenly unsure. I know I should have called, but I was in the area and I thought maybe we could talk. He hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. "Yeah, sure, come in." I followed him inside and closed the door behind me. The house smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. Normal domestic smells that felt foreign after months in a studio that smelled like coconut oil and regret. We sat in his kitchen, and he poured me a cup of coffee without asking if I wanted one. "So how was Thailand?" he asked. I thought about lying, thought about telling him it was great, that I'd had the time of my life, that everything was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. But I was tired of lying, tired of pretending. "It was hard," I said finally. "I met someone and I thought it was real and it wasn't." He nodded slowly, wrapping his hands around his mug. "I'm sorry. That must have been rough." "It was," I said. "But I'm okay now. Or I will be." We talked for hours about things we'd never talked about before, about his mother, about the divorce, about all the years I'd been gone. He told me he'd resented me for a long time, resented that I'd chosen the ocean over him and his sister. And I told him I was sorry, that I didn't know how to be a father and a sailor at the same time, that I'd made the wrong choice more often than not. It wasn't a fixing conversation, there was too much damage for that, but it was a start. When I left that evening, he hugged me, a real hug, not the stiff obligatory kind. "Take care of yourself, Dad," he said, "and maybe call more often." "I will," I promised, and I meant it. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a routine. I rented a small apartment in Halifax, nothing fancy, just a place to land. I started going to a gym, swimming laps in a cold indoor pool that smelled like chlorine. It wasn't the ocean, but it was close enough. I joined a group for retired sailors, a bunch of old guys who met once a week to drink beer and complain about the Navy. They were good company, uncomplicated, honest. One night, one of them asked if I'd been to Thailand. "Yeah," I said. "Spent some time in Phuket." "Let me guess," he said, grinning. "You met a girl." I smiled despite myself. "Something like that." Did she take you for everything you had? No, I said. Just my pride. He laughed and clapped me on the back. Could have been worse, mate. At least you've still got your liver and your passport. It was a joke, but it landed true. I had survived. I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost trust and time and a version of myself I'd liked better than the one I'd been before. But I was still here, still breathing, still moving forward. Months passed. The snow melted. Spring came, tentative and cold. I started writing more, not about Renrada or Peter, but about other things, about the ships I'd worked on, the ports I'd seen, the storms that had nearly killed me. I wrote about the men I'd sailed with and the lessons I'd learned, about what it meant to spend your life in transit, always moving, never quite arriving. One afternoon I got a message from an old coworker, a guy I'd sailed with in my 40s. He said he was starting a podcast about maritime history and wanted to interview me about my time in the Arctic. I agreed and we scheduled a call. During the interview, he asked if I had any regrets. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I regret not paying attention, I said. Not to the weather or the waves. I was good at that. But to the people around me, I missed. A lot because I was always looking at the horizon instead of what was right in front of me. And now, he asked, now I'm trying to do better, I said. After the interview, I sat in my apartment and looked out the window at the harbor. The water was choppy and gray, nothing like the turquoise perfection of the Andaman Sea, but it felt more honest somehow, real in a way that Phuket never had been. I thought about Renrada one more time, wondered where she was, if she was still at the spa or if she'd moved on to someone else. I wondered if she ever thought about me or if I was just another name in a long list of men who'd passed through her life. And I realized it didn't matter. Her story wasn't mine to tell. I could only tell my own. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm telling my story. Not because I want sympathy or because I think I'm special, but because maybe someone else needs to hear it. Maybe there's another lonely man out there, standing on a beach somewhere, thinking he's found something real. Maybe he's ignoring the red flags, convincing himself that this time it's different, that he's different. And maybe if he hears my story, he'll take a step back, ask the hard questions, protect himself before it's too late. Or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll make the same mistakes I did, trust the wrong people, believe the wrong promises. And maybe that's okay too. Maybe some lessons can only be learned the hard way. All I know is this. The ocean never lied to me. It was brutal and beautiful and indifferent, but it was always honest. It never pretended to be something it wasn't. It never promised me safety or comfort or love. It just existed, and it let me exist beside it. People aren't like that. People lie. People pretend. People promise things they have no intention of delivering. And the hardest part is learning to tell the difference between someone who cares and someone who's just good at pretending they do. I don't have all the answers. I don't even have most of for them. But I have this. I survived. I walked away. I'm still here. And if you're listening to this, if you're in a similar situation, wondering if you're crazy for feeling suspicious, wondering if you're overthinking things, wondering if maybe this time it really is different, let me tell you something. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs because you're lonely. Don't excuse behavior because you're desperate for connection. And for the love of God, don't bring your best friend into the situation because I promise you that will not end well. Learn from my mistakes. Protect yourself. And remember that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. The sea taught me that. And it's the one lesson I'll never forget. I picked up the shell from my pocket one last time, the one I'd taken from the beach that final morning. It was worn smooth by the water, all its rough edges gone. I turned it over in my fingers and thought about how the ocean does that. Takes something sharp and broken and slowly, patiently, makes it into something else. Something that doesn't hurt anymore. I set it on my windowsill next to a photo of my kids from 20 years ago, back when they still smiled when they saw me. back when I was still someone they looked up to instead of someone they tolerated. The shell sat there like a monument to everything I'd lost and everything I'd survived. A year went by, then another. I kept swimming, kept writing, kept showing up to that weekly meeting with the retired sailors. I dated a woman briefly, a Canadian teacher who'd also been divorced, but it didn't go anywhere. Not because she wasn't kind or interesting, but because I couldn't shake the habit of looking for the trap, waiting for the moment when she'd reveal she wasn't who she said she was. She noticed. "You're always waiting for me to hurt you," she said one evening over dinner. "I can feel it." "I'm sorry," I said. "It's not about you." "I know," she said gently. "But until you figure it out, you're not really available." She was right. We parted as friends, and I went back to my apartment alone. But this time the loneliness felt different. Not like a wound, but like space. Room to breathe. Room to figure out who I was without needing someone else to validate it. I started volunteering at the Maritime Museum, giving talks to school groups about life at sea. The kids asked good questions, the kind that made me think. "Were you scared during the storms?" one boy asked. "Every time," I admitted. "But you did it anyway?" "I did it anyway," I said, because sometimes the only way through fear is straight ahead. After one of those talks, an older man approached me, maybe 70, with weathered hands and a kind face. "I heard your story," he said, "the one about Thailand." I stiffened. I didn't mention Thailand in the talk. "No," he agreed. "But I've been to your blog, read what you wrote. My son sent me the link. Thought I should read it." "Why?" I asked. He smiled, sad but knowing. "Because I lived it too. Different country, different woman, same ending. I wanted to tell you it gets better." "Does it?" I asked. "It does," he said. "Not the way you think. You don't forget, and you don't stop being careful. But one day, you wake up and realize the story doesn't own you anymore. You're just someone it happened to, not someone it defines." His words stayed with me for weeks. I thought about them while I swam, while I wrote, while I lay awake at night listening to the wind rattle my windows. The story doesn't own you anymore. I wanted that to be true. I wanted to believe I could be more than the man who got fooled, more than the man who brought his best friend to paradise and lost everything. One night I got a message from Peter. It had been almost 3 years since I'd heard from him. The message was long, apologetic, full of excuses and justifications. He said he'd been drunk most of that trip, that he didn't know what he was doing, that he'd regretted it every day since. He said Renrada had been the one to initiate it, that she'd told him I didn't really love her, that I was just using her for company. He said he hoped I could forgive him, that he'd lost his best friend and it haunted him. I read the message 3 times. Each time I felt something different. Anger, pity, exhaustion. Finally, I typed back a single sentence. "I forgive you, but we're not friends anymore." He responded immediately. "I understand. I just needed you to know I'm sorry." I didn't reply after that. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It just meant I was done carrying the weight of his betrayal. A few months later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. The message was short, in broken English. "Hi Graham, this Renrada. I know you not want hear from me, but I want say, sorry. I was young and stupid. I hurt you and I sorry. I hope you happy now." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to delete it and pretend it never came. But another part of me, the part that had spent 3 years trying to make sense of what happened, wanted to respond. I typed slowly. "Why did you do it?" The reply came fast. "I don't know." I was confused. "I like you, but I also like Peter. I thought I can have both. I was wrong. I hurt everyone." "Did you ever really care about me?" I asked. There was a long pause before she answered. "Yes, I care, but I also need money. My family need help. I think maybe you can help, and also I can love you. But then Peter come, And he more fun, more young. I make bad choice. I know this now. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest. More honest than she'd ever been when we were together. I hope you're okay, I typed. I hope you figured things out. I okay, she wrote back. I marry now, have baby, I different person, I grow up. I think about you sometimes, about how I hurt you. I very sorry. I looked at her words and felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. She was a person, flawed and complicated, not a villain I'd built up in my mind. She'd made bad choices, hurt people, but she was also just trying to survive in a world that didn't give her many options. I'm glad you're okay, I typed. Take care of yourself. You too, Graham, she wrote. You good man. I hope you find good woman who deserve you. I didn't respond after that. I set my phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the harbor was quiet, the boats rocking gently in their slips, the water reflecting the lights from the city. I thought about the version of myself who'd stood on a beach in Phuket 3 years ago, heartbroken and humiliated, convinced he'd never recover. I thought about all the nights I'd spent replaying every moment, every conversation, every red flag I'd ignored, and I realized that man was gone. Not erased, but transformed, the way the ocean transforms a shell, wearing away the sharp edges until what's left is smooth and whole. I wasn't the same man I'd been before Renrada. I was more careful, more guarded, more aware of my own vulnerabilities, but I was also stronger, more honest with myself, more willing to walk away when something didn't feel right. The experience had cost me my pride, my trust, and 8 months of my life. But it had also taught me something invaluable. It taught me that I could survive anything, that I could be broken and still put myself back together, that the worst thing that could happen wasn't betrayal. It was losing myself in the process of trying to avoid it. I started traveling again, not to escape, but to explore. I went to Portugal and walked the coastal paths, to Iceland and stood beneath the northern lights, to Japan and sat in quiet temples where no one asked me anything. I wasn't looking for love or redemption or answers. I was just living, one day at a time, one moment at a time. And slowly, almost without noticing, the weight I'd been carrying started to lift. I still thought about Phuket sometimes, about the beach and the cafe and the apartment where everything fell apart. But the memories didn't sting the way they used to. They were just memories. Part of my story, but not the whole story. On my 68th birthday, I was sitting in a cafe in Lisbon when a woman at the next table smiled at me. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and laugh lines around her eyes. You look like you're thinking about something serious, she said in accented English. Just remembering, I said. Good memories or bad? She asked. I thought about it. Both, I said. But I'm still here, so I guess that counts for something. She laughed, a warm, genuine sound. It counts for everything. Surviving is underrated. We talked for an hour about nothing important, about the weather and the coffee and the best places to watch the sunset. When she stood to leave, she handed me a card with her number. If you're still in the city tomorrow, I know a great restaurant, she said. No pressure. Just a meal with someone who understands that life is complicated. I took the card and smiled. I'd like that. Good, she said. Don't overthink it. Sometimes a meal is just a meal. She walked away, and I sat there holding the card, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The possibility that not everyone was looking to take something from me, that not every connection was a trap, that maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in without losing myself in the process. I didn't know if I'd call her. I didn't know if I was ready. But for the first time since Phuket, I was willing to find out. That night I walked down to the water and watched the sun set over the Tagus River. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, colors so vivid they almost didn't seem real. I thought about the ocean, about how it had been my home for so many years, my refuge and my prison. I thought about the morning I'd stood on the beach in Phuket and decided to let go, to stop carrying the weight of what had happened and start moving forward. I'd kept that promise. I'd moved forward, one painful step at a time, through anger and grief and acceptance. And now, standing here on the other side of the world, I realized I'd made it. Not to happiness, not to some perfect ending, but to peace. Peace with what happened. Peace with who I'd been and who I'd become. Peace with the fact that I'd been broken and had survived anyway. I pulled out my phone and looked at the woman's number. Her name was Helena. I typed a message. "Hi, Helena. This is Graham from the cafe. I'd love to have dinner tomorrow if the offer still stands." I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. A minute later, my phone buzzed. "Wonderful. Meet me at 7. I'll send you the address. Looking forward to it." I smiled and put my phone away. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. I didn't know if this was the start of something or just a nice evening with a stranger. But I was showing up. I was trying. And that felt like enough. As I walked back to my hotel, I passed a small shop selling seashells and beach glass, tourist trinkets that probably came from a factory somewhere. But in the window, I saw a shell that looked exactly like the one I'd taken from Phuket, smooth and white and worn by the water. I almost went in to buy it, to replace the one I'd left behind. But then I stopped. I didn't need another shell. I didn't need a reminder of what I'd lost or what I'd survived. I had the memories, and I had the lessons, and I had the person I'd become because of them. That was enough. I kept walking, through the narrow streets, past the lit windows and the sound of laughter and music, back to my small room with the view of the river. I opened the window and let the night air in, cool and salt-tinged, and I sat on the edge of the bed and just breathed. For the first time in 3 years, I felt light. Not happy, not healed, but light. Like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Tomorrow I'd have dinner with Helena. Maybe it would go well, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe I'd find connection, or maybe I'd just find a good meal and decent conversation. Either way, I'd be okay, because I'd learned the hardest lesson of all. I'd learned that I didn't need someone else to make me whole. I'd learned that I could be broken and still be enough. I'd learned that the ocean never lied to me, and neither did the truth. People lied. People pretended. But the truth was always there, waiting, patient as the tide. And when I was ready to listen, when I was ready to stop running from it and start living with it, the truth set me free, not the way I expected, not with a dramatic revelation or a perfect ending, but quietly, gradually, like the way the ocean smooths a shell, wearing away everything that doesn't belong until all that's left is what's real. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. In the distance, I could hear the river, the sound of water moving, always moving, never still. And for the first time since I'd left Phuket, I fell asleep without dreaming of her. I dreamed of the horizon, wide and open and full of possibility. And when I woke up the next morning, I was ready.